Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Lovely, talented Dax Shepard is here.
Dax Shepard
yes.
in the house.
Yes.
That's right. Be a nice one tonight. I'm loving the energy in here.
You know, folks, last week, our friend Jon Stewart was in Congress calling on lawmakers to extend the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund, which covers health care for survivors and first responders. The fund expires next year, and it has been difficult to get Congress's attention on this issue. So Jon called them out for dragging their feet on reauthorizing the fund. Because the situation is urgent, yesterday, Jon then met with the only constituents the Republican lawmakers listened to, Fox News.
It's very likely that the House is going to pass the full bill that you want, extending the program through the lives of these people. Then you have to go to the Senate. And in your testimony, you said that a certain someone, by which it appeared that you meant Senate Leader Mitch McConnell, cannot be allowed to use this as a, quote, political football in negotiations on other spending bills. Have you had problems with Senator McConnell?
Yes. I mean, not me personally, but in terms of getting the 9/11 bills passed, Mitch McConnell has been the white whale of this since 2010.
Yes, Mitch McConnell is the white whale, in that he has been acting like a huge Moby Dick. Well, this morning, McConnell went on Fox and Friends and told Jon Stewart that when it comes to providing health care for 9/11 first responders, he should just chillax.
Why has it always seemed that the vote comes at the last minute?
Well, many things that Congress have at the last minute. We've never failed to address this issue, and we will address it again. I don't know why he's all been out of shape.
Well, Senator, I, for one, don't think...
What? What did he say?
Now that I have you here, what a delight. I may ask you, are you bent out of shape?
No, Mitch McConnell. I am not bent out of shape. I'm in fine shape. Well, I am out of shape. But not because of you. I'm actually really more pizza crust than man, really, at this point. But I'm not bent out of shape. I'm fine. I'm bent out of shape for them. These are the first heroes and veterans and victims of the great trillions of dollars war on terror. And they're currently still suffering and dying and in terrible need. You know, you would think that would be enough to get Congress's attention, but apparently it's not.
I think he was shocked that when he was appearing before that committee, so few members showed up that day.
Well, that frequently happens because members have a lot of things going on at the same time. And it sounds to me like he's looking for some way to take offense.
I feel like an ass. My God, I'm so. You know what, Stephen? Now I feel stupid. This is a huge misunderstanding. I didn't know that they were busy. I'm. Oh boy, now I don't even know what to say. I'm so. I didn't mean to interrupt them with their jobs. You know, I don't understand. You're just pantomiming. Are you just pantomiming? Honestly, Mitch McConnell, you really want to go with the "we'll get to it when we get to it" argument for the heroes of 9/11? Listen, Senator, I know that your species isn't known for moving quickly.
Would that be a turtle reference, John?
It's actually it's a little red meat for the base. That's all it is. Little red meat for the base. But damn, Senator, you're not good at this argument thing. Basically, we're saying you love the 9/11 community when they serve your political purposes. But when they're in urgent need, you slow walk, you dither, you use it as a political pawn to get other things you want, and you don't get the job done completely. And your answer to that charge is, yeah, duh, we're Congress, that's how we do. But the truth is, that's not how Congress do. That's how the kids would say it. Oh. That's how you, Mitch McConnell, do. We've spent a year compiling bipartisan co-sponsors and advocates for this bill, all in the hopes that when it finally gets to the great Mitch McConnell's desk, you won't jack us around like you've done in the past. So, if you want to know why the 9/11 community has been out of shape over these past, let's call it 18 years, meet with them tomorrow as soon as possible and don't make them beg for it. You could pass this thing as a standalone bill tomorrow. Meet with them. I beg of you. Meet with them tomorrow. Oh, but you know what? Actually, you know what? If you're busy, I get it. Just understand the next time we have a war, or you're being robbed, or your house is on fire, and you make that desperate call for help, don't get bent out of shape if they show up at the last minute with fewer people than you thought were going to pay attention and don't actually put it out. Just sort of leave it there smoldering for another 5 years, because that's how it's done around here, mister. I'm sure they'll put it out for good when they feel like getting around to it. No offense.
It is Tuesday, the 18th of June of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, folks. We put roasted corn right in that chowder because that's what makes it so especially special for our daily special. Otherwise, it would just be an everyday dish, now wouldn't it? Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us. It's been another one of those nights again, huh? You wake up and the next thing you know, more has happened. Trump is on a Twitter tear today. Oh my God. Yeah, he's extolling, the large rally in Florida. Yeah, well, I guess. And he's likening it to, no one's ever seen anything like it unless you play guitar. Well, Donald Trump's weak, stubby fingers could not fret a D chord. But he has fantasies. And I'm sure that if someone put a guitar in his hand, everybody in that room would say, "Oh, that sounds so great, dear leader. Can I have another?" Which reminds me, Dear Leader Rally. We got a story about that. Yeah, the Dear Leader Rally on the 4th of July. You know what? You can try to take my flag. And you can try to take, the very pillars of democracy and crumble them to dust. But you're not going to take the 4th of July from us. No way, mofo. This is ours, okay? We've had it for quite a while. We like to have color up in the sky. Look... Let's remember, the only reason we have fireworks is because we had damn bad munitions. Kept blowing up before it hit its mark. And everybody loved it. They said, that's America. And you know what? They're right. So, we like to honor that. You're not going to take it away. So, I think that's probably a bridge too far. Or maybe a skyscraper with your name plastered on it, one too many. I love the fact that Netanyahu said, "Oh yeah, we're going to name this part of the Golan Heights that we are stealing. We're going to name it Trump Heights." Now that could be a double-edged sword. okay? I mean, there might be some people who are a little upset that the place that they had their olive trees chopped down and, you know, their water wells despoiled and, you know, their kids shot. for I don't know, walking. They do that. Those people might get mad and take it out on Trump property somewhere. So I don't know. Maybe Netanyahu has something in mind. But it is quite funny because the place doesn't really exist yet. They'd like it to. They're working on it. Well, he's been working on that Moscow deal for quite a while, and look where it got him. His whole mob operation exposed for the world to see. Well, there's apparently people who love that and will vote for that. And love to jump up and down and cheer for that. Well, what's the old saw? Silence is complicity. Let us not be silent. What's on the rest of the menu today? Well, I got to tell you, Jon Stewart is bent out of shape. Mitch McConnell is such a duplicitous, strategic, and I got to say bastard. Okay? And I don't mean that as a pejorative against his parents. I mean just he is class A1 bastard. He revels in getting what he wants by stomping heavily on anyone who, well, just happens to be there. And I got to tell you, you know, all of us at some point start off as being Holden Caulfields. We see the adult hypocrisy oozing all around us, and it just makes us sick. And I knew from a long time ago, I got to tell you, even before my Holden Caulfield period, that the patronizing aspect of certain right-wingers to get what they want, they had no belief in fighting the Soviets. They loved their model, as evidenced right after that wall came down. The GOP and their power structure went into a 70-year Soviet model and plodded their way through until they got what they want. And you know what? It worked so well. Faster than 70 years. So Mitch McConnell is all a part of that. He doesn't care about what happened at 9/11, but how it can be used in a political stunt. Or shall I say stunts? Because it's being held as a wager. It's being held as a good faith gesture that will be taken away at the last minute as a bait and switch. All right. Well, people like that used to go to jail, at least on the Democratic side, because we put our scofflaws in jail, because that's where they belong. The law is the law, and it applies equally to everybody. Just because you're on our side doesn't mean you get to get away with it, you pedophile. Boy, a lot of pedophiles in the right wing, and they seem to get away with it over and over and over, as if it's almost a policy plank in their platform. Could be when you're deconstructing the administrative state, you want to put in a few poison pills. You know, weak little structure there that might bring the whole house of cards down. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. I'm already going off, and it's not even Thursday. Well, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, Clarence Thomas admitted he wants to burn down the very idea that courts should obey precedent. Oh, yeah, now you say that. Okay. Well, he's actually been saying it for quite a while because he doesn't care. Okay. Oh, looks like RedState quietly removed another conspiracy-flavored Mueller post. Propagandists. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sometimes we read RedState so you don't have to. And Virginia may have free and fair elections for the first time in nearly a decade. May have, because it's still, anything can happen with these, well, you know what they are, who are trying to, destroy the very pillars of democracy, turning it into dust. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where the Trump administration still owes the D.C. government $7 million for the inauguration. So Vegas gamblers are wagering how much Trump will owe for his Dear Leader rally on the 4th of July. And with echoes of Kristalnacht resonating loud and clear, Trump ordered ICE to remove millions of undocumented immigrants beginning next week. I see the Warsaw Ghetto, too, coming on very soon. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for taking care of that. To the leftish of the page is our link to our Patreon site. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Those of you who have sustained us all these 8 years of resistance broadcasting. 8 years, we're celebrating it. 24/7, 365. How did we do it? Well, a lot of nerve. Yeah, we got a lot of nerve to do that. And thank you for giving us the nerve to do it. And if you could afford a coffee type latte coffee type drink once a month, the funds coming our way, we're able to stretch those dollars beyond all measure, because after all, we are in the quantum universe. And all kidding aside, thank you for your generosity. We will continue to resist because of it. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. All you have to do is go to @NetrootsRadio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then post the links on social media in that scramble period. That's what I call it. And then you can also follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found, mixed in with every single other podcast in the world. Little program note here. I'll be telling you when to mark your calendars. We're putting the technical aspects together so that Ian Reifowitz and I can tape a interview about his new book that's come out. And I'm sure that you've heard some interviews with him on other shows. The Tribalization of Politics, How Rush Limbaugh's Race-Baiting Rhetoric on the Obama Presidency Paved the Way for Trump. And as an added treat, there's a foreword by Marcos. So we'll be speaking about this tome. Ian and I have bumped into each other at Netroots Nation, and we also know each other from being longtime members on Black Co's, of course, a subgroup of Daily Co's. And he is quite the scholar, and he writes in an accessible manner, but more importantly, he's touched upon something that is so obvious, But it really does need to be measured because, after all, we are in the quantum universe, indeed. So I'll give you a heads up on when to mark your calendars. We'll be recording that interview sometime in early July, and then we'll have that turned around and ready to go. Ian Millhiser of Think Progress brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Justice Clarence Thomas has long approached the law the same way that Heath Ledger's Joker approaches urban peace. He suggested that federal child labor laws and the ban on whites-only lunch counters are unconstitutional, because it's everybody's choice right now. Written opinions that would blow up multiple federal agencies and argue that high school students lack First Amendment rights because 17th century self-help books told parents to be cruel to their children. Yet on Monday, because remember, he argued that 17th century self-help books are in essentially original intent. Okay. Original intent is where you see whatever originally intended to be. Yet on Monday of this week, after nearly 3 decades on the Supreme Court, Thomas finally articulated his approach to stare decisis, the principle that courts should generally follow the rules announced in past decisions. I got to tell you, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that when we took constitutional history as, a focus in our history degrees. Yeah, we had history degrees back in the day. Isn't that weird? How did anybody get a job with a history degree? Actually, you were able to get a job in a lot of different fields. Adaptable. Really knowledgeable about a lot of things. But regardless, there was no room for dilettantes in these constitutional history classes. And one thing that was pretty much drilled in our head is the idea of precedent. Stare decisis. It's what's really the whole foundation of the pillars of democracy. Where did Clarence Thomas come from? Federalist Society. They always name their organizations that which they will destroy. Though Thomas dresses up his concurring opinion in Gamble v. United States, and what a doozy that case is, with a few paragraphs that seem to soften his conclusion, the rule he ultimately articulates would give his court free rein to burn down any decision that 5 of its members do not like. I'm so old I remember that there was supposed to be a unanimous decision. And that was actually imposed by Republican Chief Justices even. Wow. It's the kind of judicial arson one might expect from a justice who, after spending much of his career writing lone dissents that had little impact on his colleagues, now thinks he may have the votes to do things his way. Well, I got to tell you, when Ronald Reagan first ran for president, people laughed at him because he's a clown. I know, St. Ronnie. But really, people looked at him as a clown. He was able to ape the policy statements. He was a good actor that way. He wasn't a good actor by any means, but he was a good actor enough to act presidential. Okay. But he was laughed out of town and pretty much the country. And then not very long after that, you wait long enough and you don't do anything about it to really stamp it down. The next thing you know, here we are. There are many reasons why courts typically adhere to stare decisis. Stability in the law is an important virtue, for one thing. Legislators will pass laws, companies will make investments, and individuals will shape their actions based on their assessment of existing precedents. If those precedents can be wiped away on a whim, all of this planning will be for naught, and many crucial investments may never happen because investors cannot plan for an uncertain future. When put together in a whole about the deconstruction of the administrative state, I suppose instability in the law and instability in investments and instability in the normal structures, well, everybody knows property is always more valuable when delivered vacant to a hostile foreign power. Kate Riga of Talking Points Memo brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. It appears that conservative blogger RedState quietly took down another conspiracy-flavored post from its website. At the same time, it removed a piece asserting falsely that Special Counsel Robert Mueller covered up murdered DNC employee Seth Rich's hack of the DNC. They're still on this, even though I believe, wasn't there a court case that, maybe there was. Jay McKenzie, a self-identified disinformation researcher, spotted the same headline and seemingly the same body of a post preserved on efreenews.com. And the post takes the same tack as the other one that was ultimately removed, doubting Mueller's findings that the Russians hacked DNC emails and provided them to WikiLeaks. It appears to have been written by Elizabeth Vaughn, who also authored the other post, and that was the one on Seth Rich. And the Mueller report unequivocally confirmed that the DNC server was hacked by the Russians, she writes. This finding would debunk the conspiracy theory of the late Seth Rich, the DNC staffer who was murdered in July 2016, had downloaded onto a flash drive and leaked the DNC emails to WikiLeaks. That is, if the Mueller report had been accurate. RedState did not immediately respond to questions about the post and its removal because it's RedState. They don't follow normal rules of journalism, now do they? The first post about Rich and Mueller was taken down after an internet outcry and a disavowal from former CEO Eric Erickson. The goat fucking guy. Mueller said outright in his report that Rich was not behind the leaks. Rich's murder is still a mystery, though police have speculated that it could have been a robbery gone awry. Ian Millhiser of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. For the last several election cycles, the Virginia House of Delegates was so egregiously gerrymandered that the Commonwealth of Virginia ceased to be a democracy. In 2017, Democratic candidates for the state house won the statewide popular vote by over 9 percentage points, yet Republicans held on to a 51 to 49 majority in the House. Well, that's likely to change thanks in part to the Supreme Court's decision in Virginia House of Delegates v. Bethune-Hill, which was handed down just on Monday. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's decision for a majority of the court was not a doctrinal earthquake, and it says nothing about the still pending question of whether states may draw gerrymanders to benefit one party over the other. Nevertheless, the court's decision in Bethune-Hill marks the end of one of the most rigid gerrymanders in the country, and it gives Democrats a fighting chance at winning the state house in this November's election. Not if Vlad can help it. The decision was 5-4, as it always is now. Remember? Oh, you don't remember. I'm old enough to remember when, the Supreme Court justice really pretty much demanded unanimous decisions. Well, and of course, these 5-4 decisions broke down unusual lines, this time with Ginsburg being joined by Thomas, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Trump Judge Neil Gorsuch. Alito wrote the dissent for the remaining members of the court, which included Clinton appointee Stephen Breyer. Well. The narrow question decided at Bethune-Hill is whether the Republican-controlled House of Delegates could appeal a lower court decision striking down 11 of Virginia's legislative districts as unconstitutional racial gerrymanders, when the state's Democratic Attorney General declined to bring such an appeal. Justice Ginsburg's opinion concludes that, the House cannot do that. Virginia would rather stop than fight on, she wrote, adding that one house of its bicameral legislature cannot alone continue the litigation against the will of its partners in the legislative process, among other things. Ginsburg relies on a state statute providing that, with few exceptions, all legal service and civil matters for the Commonwealth, the governor, and every state department, institution, division, commission, board, bureau, agency, entity, official, court, or judge shall be rendered and performed by the Attorney General. Now, of course, remember, the Attorney General in the state is voted for and upon. It is ultimately the Attorney General's decision whether the state shall bring an appeal or allow a lower court decision to stand. The newly drawn maps are more favorable to Democrats than the ones struck down in this case, and as Democrats already control the governor's mansion in Virginia, the decision of Bethune-Hill means they could soon control the entire government in this increasingly blue state. Not if the Federalist Society has a say about this. Are you kidding me? Well, one can only hope for change now, can't they? Nevertheless, Bethune-Hill is a narrow decision, and it will do little to deter future gerrymanders. Yes, Democrats will now get to run in one election that will be fairer than the ones that immediately preceded it, but Republicans still got to run under gerrymandered maps for several election cycles, shall we say decades. Bethune-Hill does nothing to undo those past elections. In other words, unless the Supreme Court comes up with a faster way to process gerrymandering cases, state lawmakers will continue to have every incentive to rig elections for their party. Because if you get to win under a gerrymandered map, when do you think they're going to come after you? 10, 12, 15 years later? By that time, you got exactly what you wanted, didn't you? Okay, that brings us to our break period, and when we come back from our break, we're going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. In the wild, monkeys need to keep their eyes peeled for all sorts of dangers, like leopards and eagles and snakes. But the green monkeys studied by Julia Fischer of the German Primate Center have an additional challenge. They also have to scan the skies for drones.
Why did we fly a drone over green monkeys, one may ask?
One may indeed. The answer is that Fisher and her colleagues are interested in how primates communicate. In a classic study back in the 1980s, scientists showed that East African vervet monkeys produce alarm calls that are specific for the predators they encounter. So, for example, vervet monkeys hearing a leopard alarm might scurry up a tree, whereas the eagle call sends them running for cover under the closest shrub. Now, the green monkeys that live in Senegal share a similar system to warn of leopards and snakes, but they aren't known to raise a ruckus in response to birds of prey.
And so, therefore, we decided to fly a drone over them.
The researchers treated 80 green monkeys to a show of drones. How did the animals react to this unfamiliar aerial intruder?
The monkeys did respond. They responded with alarm calls, and they responded by running away.
But here's where things get really interesting. The calls the green monkeys made, after spotting the drones, were different from the ones they used to signal leopards or snakes. But even more intriguing,
when we did an acoustic analysis, these alarm calls were almost eerily similar to the ones of the East African vervet.
The findings are described in the journal Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. The fact that the two monkey species seem to speak the same language, if you will, even though they diverged from their last common ancestors some 3 million years ago, suggests that the vocal warning system is hardwired. So, if you hear a monkey go, watch out for a hungry bird, or check to see if you got a package delivered. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health will keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Aspirin use when appropriate. B. Blood pressure control. C. Cholesterol management. And S. Smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In 2017, approximately 1 in 6 high school students reported a sports or physical activity-related concussion. Immediate symptoms of a concussion include headache, nausea, and double vision. Long-term, the effects of such injuries, particularly those that are more severe, can be life-changing. Healthcare providers, coaches, trainers, and parents should be aware of the symptoms of a concussion and how to treat them. A concussion protocol should be developed that includes withholding an athlete from practice and competition until all symptoms are resolved. While concussions cannot always be prevented, they can be treated in a way that decreases the chances of long-term health problems. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Here's the story of deep fakes, also known as how the Russians are upping their electoral interference game.
I'm Baratunde Thurston from The Onion, and also, mother. You're listening to the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The chair of the House Intelligence Committee has made public the fact that the Russian government appears intent on influencing the 2020 elections in the United States. This time, not by releasing stolen emails and other documents, but rather by releasing fake videos, known as deep fakes. Because carefully crafted, controversial fake videos are highly disruptive and hugely influential, and if carefully created, extremely hard to prove that they're fake and nearly impossible to prove who made the video. Reflect on the recent fake video of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, which is known as a cheap fake, really low caliber, and look how much currency and traction it got. Imagine what a high-quality, well-placed deepfake could do. As Adam Schiff, the head of the House Intelligence Committee, said, I cannot imagine anything more corrosive to a democracy than in an environment where no one can tell what is true anymore. You simply retreat to your tribe and view everything as true or false, depending on what party or what group you belong to.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1942. That was the day that an historic meeting took place at the White House. Black labor leader A. Philip Randolph, along with the head of the NAACP, sat down to talk with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The topic of the meeting was ending discrimination against black workers in war industries. Although the U.S. had not yet entered World War II, factories had ramped up production in support of the Allied forces. That year, U.S. factories shipped out nearly 5.5 billion tons of weapons, artillery, planes, and ships. Yet black workers found themselves shut out of many of these production jobs. Only 204 of more than 100,000 of those who manufactured airplanes were black. Black workers were blocked from 250,000 jobs. Determined to break this color barrier, Randolph began to organize a march on Washington, D.C. The plan was to demand war industry integration. President Roosevelt was eager to avoid the threatened march. He knew that the event would undercut the idea of the United States as a bastion of democracy. At his wife Eleanor's urging, he decided to meet with Randolph. Randolph refused to call off the march unless the president had ordered an end to hiring discrimination. Randolph refused to call off the march unless the president ordered an end to the hiring discrimination. In his call to march on Washington, Randolph had declared nothing counts but pressure. He kept up the pressure, insisting to be allowed to read the draft of the president's executive order. Only when it was edited to Randolph's satisfaction did he call off the demonstration. The result was Presidential Executive Order 8802. It declared, "There shall be no discrimination in employment of workers in the defense industries or government because of race, creed, color, or national origin."
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Tensions are on the rise in the Middle East, where Tehran's nuclear agency announced that in 10 days it will exceed the amount of enriched uranium it's allowed under the 2015 nuclear deal. Iran's announcement pressures Europe to try to salvage the pact it helped negotiate along with the Obama administration, but which Trump rejected last year. The president and his national security team say military options are on the table while they asked for, quote, increased international pressure on Iran. The Pentagon, of course, is doing its part, announcing it will dispatch an additional 1,000 troops in response to these recent attacks on oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman that the United States is blaming on Iran. These 1,000 troops are in addition to the reinforcements of 1,500 personnel sent to the region late last month, along with the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier battle group. Donald Trump said in a tweet Monday night that U.S. immigration agents are planning to make mass arrests starting, quote, next week, in an apparent reference to a plan in preparation for months that aims to round up thousands of migrant parents and children in a blitz operation across major U.S. cities. Quote, next week, ICE will begin the process of removing the millions of illegal aliens who have illicitly found their way into the United States. They will be removed as fast as they come in, Trump tweeted. U.S. officials with knowledge of the preparations have said in recent days that the operation was not imminent, and ICE officials said late Monday night that they were not aware that the president planned to divulge their enforcement plans on Twitter. Fact check time. There's no way ICE can deport, quote, millions of people in the near term. In fiscal year 2012, at its peak, the agency deported 409,849 individuals. In 2017, the first year for which we have partial data under Trump, that number was 226,119. Just keeping them honest. Freshman Congresswoman Katie Porter of California posted a new video online in which she explains why she is now supporting an impeachment inquiry.
I've reached a point of clarity in my decision. Congress must continue the work of Special Counsel Mueller. In his report and public remarks, Director Mueller emphasized that under current law, he did not have the option to indict the president. But despite the limits of his authority, the special counsel was clear that he could not exonerate the president, and he presented extensive evidence of obstruction of justice that requires continued investigation by Congress. The administration has refused to respect the rule of law. They have ignored multiple subpoenas. They've directed current and former high-ranking officials to disregard summons to testify, and the president has continued his efforts to spread mistrust of our law enforcement, contempt for our journalists, and false information about the law, Director Mueller's findings, and basic uncontested facts. The question is not whether a crisis is in our midst, but rather whether we choose to fight against it.
Only 2 Democrats in Republican districts have called for impeachment proceedings. The other is Congressman Tom Malinowski, a former Obama State Department official who represents New Jersey's 7th district. The Supreme Court is nearing the end of its current term and is expected to hand down a flurry of big opinions in the final days of June. On Monday, we got 2. First, the justices ruled against the Virginia House of Delegates in a racial gerrymandering case that represented a victory for Democrats in Virginia. In a case that only had implications for Virginia, in a 5-4 ruling, the court found that the state house didn't have the standing to appeal a lower court ruling that found that new district maps must be used ahead of the 2020 elections. Those new maps are already in use. Associate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote for the majority, which included the unusual bedfellows of Justices Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch. The other case for which we got a decision on Monday deals with double jeopardy. And it wasn't the outcome Paul Manafort and others implicated in Trump's web of crime and corruption were hoping for.
The Supreme Court here upholding this exception, which basically says that state and federal prosecutors can bring charges against one person for the same underlying crime without violating the double jeopardy clause. This was actually a challenge brought by an Alabama man, a convicted felon, who was charged for possessing a weapon both by the feds and the state State, but the Supreme Court was very reluctant to do away with this doctrine since it is such a long-standing exception here. If the challengers had succeeded, it could have provided somewhat of an opening for Paul Manafort. You'll remember that within really minutes of Paul Manafort being sentenced in Washington, D.C. for those federal crimes, the Manhattan District Attorney brought charges against Paul Manafort in New York State for mortgage fraud crimes. Paul Manafort could have potentially argued that he couldn't be brought in both federal court and state court, but the Supreme Court essentially putting that to rest. This separate sovereigns exception will stand, that state and federal prosecutors can, in fact, bring charges that result from the same underlying offense without violating the Double Jeopardy Clause.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I really can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 59 degrees Fahrenheit, a little bit cooler this morning. Slated for a high of only the mid-80s. Only. And that is quite a bit lower than what we have experienced here recently. Overnight lows in the mid to upper 50s. Tomorrow should be a high of, well, the upper 70s to low 80s. Small chance of precipitation as the days go on. Winds are currently light and variable. Let's see, out of the west. Will change out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Later on, about an hour to an hour and a half, and then shifting again this evening out of the north-northwest, continuing at that same clip, and sunny conditions will prevail throughout the day and tomorrow. Grass pollen is very high. The air quality index is very good at 11 parts per million, though the daytime UV index is very high at 9. So everyone take care wherever you are, no matter what that UV index is. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.94 inches. Visibility is at 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 65%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 67 degrees with a rain shower. Paris is 85 degrees and sunny. That's pretty darn hot. Rome is 85 and sunny. Kiev is 84 and fair. Kabul is 75 degrees and sunny. Hong Kong is 80 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 72 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 56 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit and just merely cloudy. That is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. The Trump administration and Congress still owe the District of Columbia government $7 million for expenses related to the 2017 presidential inauguration, raising questions about who will foot the bill for Trump's planned July 4th speech at the Lincoln Memorial. Citing city and federal financial records, the Washington Post reported that the D.C. government has had to dip into a special fund dedicated to city security costs to protect against terrorist threats and for hosting large demonstrations, foreign dignitary visits, and other non-routine events. Well, Trump's not getting a cut for that security now, isn't he? And he's not going to pay. Trump never pays. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser's office did not immediately respond for comment, but her chief of staff told the Washington Post, "All that we ask of our federal partners is continued cooperation and the resources to carry out these activities."
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Now, I failed to mention that anonymous worker bees brought us the first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and even more anonymous worker bees, or it could be the same ones, bring us this final offering here in the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. This is no joke here, folks. Trump said that U.S. authorities will begin next week removing millions of immigrants who are in the United States illegally, by his standards, because anybody who's brown, who's an immigrant, is gone because they obviously are illegal. Just look at them. Next week, ICE will begin the process of removing millions of illegal aliens who have illicitly found their way into the United States. Trump tweeted, referring to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, "They will be removed as fast as they came in." He didn't offer specifics, but I don't know. He's got a lot of brown shirts that can help doing the job. Under a deal reached earlier this month, Mexico has agreed to take Central American immigrants seeking asylum in the United States until their cases are heard in the U.S. courts. And Vice President Mike Pence suggested last week that Guatemala could receive asylum seekers from his neighbors as a so-called safe third country. Well, Guatemala has not publicly confirmed talks that the U.S. State Department said were taking place in Guatemala. U.S. rights group Human Rights First said, however, it was simply ludicrous for the U.S. to assert that Guatemala was capable of protecting refugees when its own citizens are fleeing violence. These people are not here illegally. They come to ports of entry and then are forced to go in between the ports of entry. They are due their asylum applications. What are we? Americans or Gestapo? Well, I think ICE and Trump would like it to be really Gestapo. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme aux langues de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.